Hey artists, welcome back to a new week at Art Playground with Mrs. Vaughn. This week we are learning about an artist who has 23 first names. I'm going to start reading his name and you take a guess who this artist is if you can figure it out before I get to number 23. His name is Pablo Diego Jose, Francisco de Paula, Juan Nepomuceno, Maria de los Remedios, Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Martyr, Patricio Clito Ruiz y Picasso. And if you guessed, you were correct. Pablo Picasso is our artist this week, and he was named after family members and saints by his parents. When we learn about artists, I love hearing the interesting history and stories behind them. Pablo Picasso had something really crazy happen to him. He was in Paris, France, living a bohemian lifestyle, making art not far from the Louvre Museum. And at the time, the Louvre Museum was under a lot of criticism for not having great security. Their pictures were not bolted to the walls. They don't have security like we do now with like cameras and motion detectors and alarms. What they had was pictures hanging on a wall like this one, and security guards would walk around every now and then, but there weren't even very many security guards for a museum that had that many amazing works of art. So guess what happens? A very famous picture named the Mona Lisa gets stolen from the Louvre Museum. And our artist of the week gets accused with a friend of stealing the Mona Lisa. It took him 2 years to finally prove that it was not him. And here's what actually happened. An Italian artist named Vincenzo Perugia was very upset. He was working at the Louvre and he was upset that this famous piece of art, the Mona Lisa, was in Paris. He thought it belonged in Italy. So he stole it and he hid it for 2 years, and it was in perfectly good shape when he gave it back. He was trying to make a point, but what happened is poor Pablo was stressing out, thinking he was going to get deported from France and sent back and, was going to be seen guilty for doing something he didn't do. So good news, Pablo's good name was cleared. He went on to many, many years of making wonderful art. I hope you enjoy learning about him today. As you have heard, Pablo Picasso had many, many names, but he was commonly referred to as Pablo Ruiz Picasso. He was born in Malaga, Spain, and loved art from the time he was a young man. His family said his first word was lápiz, which means pencil in Spanish. His dad, Ruiz, was an artist and a professor. He gave his son a formal art education starting at the age of 7. By the time Pablo was 13, his father gave up painting because he felt like his son had better skills than he had. Picasso finished his first painting at age 8. It was called Picador. It depicts a bullfight, an activity he started attending at a very young age. Pablo got into a lot of trouble at school, which put him in detention. Ironically, he liked that. He would be locked in a bare cell, but he took a sketch pad along and said he could have stayed in there forever drawing. He experimented with art throughout his lifetime. He had 4 distinct periods: Blue Period, Rose Period, Cubism, and Neoclassical. His Blue Period was from 1901 to 1904. He lost a close friend and was sad. He was in Paris, France at the time, and for 4 years, most of his paintings were dominated by the color blue. Here are 2 examples: Poor People on the Seashore and The Old Guitarist. During the Rose Period, why the Rose Period, do you ask? Well, he fell in love with a French model. He began to use warmer colors, including pinks, reds, oranges, and beiges. He began to paint happier pictures, including scenes such as circuses. Here are The Peasants and Mother and Child. This is The Three Musicians. It was part of his Cubism period, and it was a long one from 1907 to 1921. Cubism is using geometric shapes to represent a specific form. He started experimenting with this new style of painting. He worked with another artist named George Brock. Subjects are studied and broken up into sections. The sections were put back together and painted from different perspectives and angles. He continued with Cubism, but in 1921 he went through a period of more classical painting. He also experimented with Surrealism starting in 1924. Surrealism is like something you would see in a dream or a nightmare. Some people call this his monster period. Many say he was the greatest artist of all time. One of his last works was a self-portrait which he drew on paper with a crayon. He died 1 year later at the age of 91. All right, for supplies, older kiddos, I recommend cardboard, which is a little more difficult to cut through. Younger, I think construction paper is perfectly appropriate. You will also need a pencil and eraser, scissors, glue, and you have a lot of choices for what you want to use to color it. You can do pens, crayons, colored pencils, or paint. I've got my supplies ready. So here's a template, just ideas of different head shapes. Picasso did not do things in a normal way. So I have a few samples there. You can use your creativity and do any kind you want. As you can see, I'm just using a cardboard box I cut up. Cardboard is probably great for older kids, a little more challenging for younger kids because it's heavy, so feel free to use paper if you think it's a little bit challenging. I'm just drawing out my shape and then I'm going to color my head in. It's kind of like a background. Picasso does a lot of angles and colors and patterns and it's pretty wild. So I'm just going to speed you through this section where I'm going to be coloring in the background for my Picasso face. A fun thing to do is to go online and look at some of the ones he did. He has some really crazy in a very interesting way of faces that he has done. I really encourage that. I think you will get some ideas too for this project. I'm just going to cut out my head. And I'm going to repeat the same pattern over and over. So first it's going to be the head, and I'm going to color it, and I'm going to cut it out. And then I'm going to go to the next part of the body, and I'll show you a template, and I'm going to draw it, and I'm going to color it, and I'm going to cut it out. I don't do them all at once because sometimes if your head's not big enough, the eyes are too big, it kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. So that's the size of my head. How about I work on the mouth? Here's some ideas. There are so many more ideas out there, so feel free to use your creativity to come up with your mouth. Did you see how I put my nose there and made sure it was too long? It wasn't going to fit, so I gave it a little trim. So let's talk about eyes. You and I have eyes that are very similar or symmetrical. Look at the two eyes I'm making. Picasso did not do matching things. So I'm going to have one eye with big old eyelashes and the other one's just going to be a simple round eye. Do they have to be side by side? Absolutely not, because part of his whimsy in his art is doing things not the usual way. It's not the predictable way where you think things would be. That's what catches your attention when you look at a Picasso portrait he has done. They're not realistic. Gotta figure out what I'm gonna do for hair on this guy. Last step in our project is gluing everything together. This is your last opportunity to kind of practice, lay it out the way you think it looks best before you glue it in place. If you're using paper, just a little bit of glue. If you use cardboard, you need a little bit more glue to get the heavier paper to glue together. That's it. Let your Picasso face dry and enjoy it. If you enjoyed visiting our playground today, please subscribe to our channel and ring the bell.